I served as a law enforcement officer for 27 years. It is a tough job, and good police officers deserve your support. You know, it's interesting to see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle support the police when it is politically convenient to do so. Law enforcement officers risk their lives every day. They deserve better, and the American people deserve. I have the floor, Mr. Jordan.
Lady has
What,
the floor.
did I strike a nerve? Law enforcement officers deserve better than to be utilized as pawns. And you and your colleagues should be ashamed of yourself.
The gentlelady will suspend and the clock will be stopped. I want to admonish members. They must not interrupt someone who has the time.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a
simply
question?
Can't shout out. If you think that someone is saying
I agree.
Mr. Jordan, you don't know what in the heck you're talking about. You know nothing about what law enforcement officers do.
I know about my motive.
And you're using them as pawns because it serves your ridiculous political purpose.
Val, everyone must suspend. I am making the point. No one may shout out when someone else has the time. Not Mr. Gomert.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Not Mr. Jordan. Nobody.
Not Mr. Cicilline.
Not Miss.
Not Ms.
He
Demings.
didn't do that. But nobody.
Not Mr. Jordan.
Not Ms.
Nobody.
Cicilline. Okay, no, but I agree with that. But I have
And
a question.
how do we,
Everybody.
I have a
I
question.
will simply. There is no
I got the
question.
same question.
Nobody may shout out.
When you
If
give
you
a
see
speech, Mr. Chairman,
nobody
about
may-
motives and questioning motives, and
This
then our motives are
is
questioned,
emotionally
how do we
charging
address
for
that?
me
The rules
because
allow
I
a
was law
request
enforcement officer.
words.
I have
Point of
watched them
inquiry.
live and die, and you know nothing about that.
Rule-
And to utilize them as political
Mr. Chairman,
pawns
I have a point of
pisses me
inquiry.
off.
People
Chairman,
will
I have a
address
point of
comments
inquiry.
to the chair.
Mr.
The rules
Chairman.
The rules do not permit shouting out when someone else has the time. The only thing you may do when someone else has the time is you may raise a point of order if you think it proper, and the chair will then rule on the
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
So you gave us a lecture on people questioning our motives. When someone questions our motives, how do we address it when they're in the act
That
of
is
questioning
not
our
a
motives?
point of order.
Yes, it is.
That is not a point of
Mr.
order.
Chairman, may I continue, please?
That is not a point of order. Ms. Demings
Parliamentary.
has the time, and the clock will resume. Gentlelady's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to hear that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are on the side of law enforcement now. Because I don't know where my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been over the last 4 years, including on January 6th, when police officers who protect us every day were fighting for their lives because of the big lie that was told, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were silent. As one person after another person took the microphone and said, go down there and engage in combat, fight like hell. They used the bicycle racks as deadly missiles against the law enforcement officers that you all say you care about so much. And thank you, Mr. Cicilline, because you're absolutely right. The only person who voted to support local governments and passed legislation to support local governments that includes law enforcement were the Democratic members on this side of the aisle. But now today, you support law enforcement. Well, I'm delighted to know that. But don't support them when it's politically convenient for you to do so. Support them when they're under attack by people fighting them and spraying them and knocking them to the ground and beating them with poles, with carrying the American flags and pipes.
Republicans have been consistent. The gentlelady from Florida said Republicans care about law enforcement today. We've cared about law enforcement all the time. It's been the Democrats. We condemned the violence on January 6th, and we condemned it last summer. It'd have been nice if our colleagues on the other side had done the same. All last summer, when police were being pelted with frozen water bottles, bricks, and beat up, where were they? They were raising bail money to bail out the rioters and looters who were doing those very actions to the police. And today we get a lecture about how we haven't been consistent? You got to be kidding me. We've been consistent. You guys haven't, and you know it. That's why you're all so fired up. Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 19 minutes. 19 minutes. 4 years ago on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2017, 19 minutes into President Trump's administration, at 12:19 p.m., the Washington Post headline was, "Campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." And now, with just 1 week left, they're still trying. In 7 days, there will be a peaceful transfer of power, just like there has been every other time in our country. But Democrats are going to impeach President Trump again. This doesn't unite the country. There's no way this helps the nation deal with the tragic and terrible events of last week that we all condemn. And Republicans have been consistent. We've condemned all the violence all the time. We condemned it last summer. We condemned it last week. We should be focused on bringing the nation together. Instead, Democrats are going to impeach the president for a second time 1 week before he leaves office. Why? Why? Politics and the fact that they want to cancel the president. The president who cut taxes, the president who reduced regulations, the president prior to COVID had the greatest economy, lowest unemployment in 50 years, the president who got us out of the Iran deal, put the embassy in Jerusalem, brought hostages home from North Korea, put 3 great justices on the Supreme Court, gave us a new NAFTA agreement, the Abraham Accords, the COVID vaccine, and who built the wall. It's about politics. This is about getting the President of the United States. They spied on his campaign before he was elected. 19 minutes into his presidency, they started the impeachment push. 3-year Mueller investigation, 19 lawyers, 40 agents, 500 witnesses, 2,500 subpoenas, $40 million to find nothing. Impeachment round 1 based on an anonymous whistleblower with no firsthand knowledge who was biased against the president and who worked for Joe Biden. And now it's impeachment round 2. It's always been about getting the president no matter what. It's an obsession that is now broadened. It's not just about impeachment anymore, it's about canceling, as I've said. Canceling the president and anyone that disagrees with them. The Ayatollah can tweet, the president can't. Democrats can object on January 6, 2017, but Republicans aren't allowed to object on January 6, 2021. Democrats say Antifa is a myth. Republicans condemn all violence all the time. The double standard has to stop. And frankly, the attack on the First Amendment has to stop. And stop and think about it. Do you have a functioning First Amendment when the cancel culture only allows one side to talk? When you can't even have a debate in this country, this great country, the greatest country ever? It needs to stop, because if it continues, it won't just be Republicans who get canceled. It won't just be the President of the United States. The cancel culture will come for us all. Right. America's a great country, the greatest country ever. It seems to me that we need to think about how great the people of this nation really are. Think about what we've accomplished in the past and begin to come together as leaders who represent so many great folks across our districts. Think about this. Think about this. In 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, 2 guys fly this thing they called a plane 100 feet. Barely got off the ground. Barely got off the ground. Amazing thing. 44 years later, Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier. In 44 years, we go from 2 guys flying a contraption they called a plane a few hundred feet to Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier. And 22 years after that, another American steps on the moon. Think about it. In one lifetime, in 66 years, 2 guys flying 100 feet to putting a man on the moon. That's what this country is capable of. That's what we can do. And we, as the Congress who represent the people who did that, should start leading. Should start understanding what really is going on here. So I hope we defeat this. I hope we can begin to come together and recognize the greatness of the American people and focus on the things they want us to focus on. I yield back our time.